Hello students, welcome to short concept video session on Medico apps. Today I'll be discussing a very important concept on major connector. But before that, I want you to subscribe our YouTube channel so that whenever I post such kind of important concept videos and also MCQ discussions, you will be notified for that. So let's start our today's discussion on major connector. So major connector, whenever a term called major connector is used in front of you, what do you understand by that? So for that, you need to understand that in a removable partial denture, the removable partial denture is made up of 6 components, and among them, the major connector is the largest and the most important component of the removable partial denture. Now, how it is important? So, just let me explain you that. So, for a removable partial denture, the ideal requirement is that it should be rigid and it should be stable on both the side of the arch whenever we give it to a patient with partial denture, okay, with partial arch. Now, what do you understand how the significance of major connector comes? So, whenever we give a removable partial denture, as I have told you, the forces, okay, the forces should be equally distributed. What forces? The functional forces should be equally distributed in whole of the arch. Now, as you can see in this image, if I am giving a removable partial denture to the patient, definitely the forces should be equally distributed on the right side and the left side to provide the stability and rigidity of this removable prosthesis to the patient. So for that, we need to connect the right side of the arch to the left side of the arch. And how it is connected? It is connected by the help of a major connector. And I want to also point out one thing, that all the components, all the other 5 components of removable partial denture are directly or indirectly connected with these major connectors. So as you can see in this image, this is a major connector we are discussing, and the significance I have just mentioned, what it is doing, it is connecting the right side of the arch to the left side of the arch. That means these are the prostheses we have given on the right side and left side, and what this appliance is doing, it is connecting the right side to the left side of the arch in the patient. Now, how would you define it? So let's get into the definition of major connector. Major connector, as I have just told you, that it's a part of removable partial denture. This is the first key point here. Okay, that I have already told you that how it is significant, because whenever a removable partial denture is given, it is important to have a rigidity and stability so that the forces can be equally distributed on both sides of the arches. So, first key point is that it is a part of removable partial denture. Now, what is the significance or what is the importance of this major connector? So, it is connecting the components of one side of the arch to the components of the other side of the arch, the opposite side of the arch. That means connecting the right side of the arch to the left side of the arch. So let's combine the definition, and let's just revise the definition of major connector, that it's a part of removable partial denture which connects the components of one side of the arch to the opposite side of the arch. I hope you now remember the major component or the major connectors definition. With this, I want to also discuss the ideal requirements. Now, these major connectors can be maxillary or mandible. Okay, that you should know and you have to know. Now, there are certain ideal requirements which are or which needs to be followed by these major connectors. So let's see what are those important ideal requirements which needs to be followed. And among them, the first one is that it should be rigid. The major connector should not be flexible. Okay, it should be rigid. Now, rigid because whenever the occlusal forces are given on these prostheses, it should be stable, it should be rigid, so that the occlusal forces are equally distributed among all the prostheses in the oral cavity. The second one is that it should provide vertical support and protect soft tissues. Now, what do you understand by that? So, vertical support means the support which is given towards the gingiva, and protecting the soft tissue. That means it should protect the soft tissue, that is the gingiva of the oral cavity. Okay. The third important idle requirement is that it should provide a means of indirect retention. Okay, now indirect retention means the fulcrum of this particular major connector should not rotate around. It should be present and it should be stable in its position, so that the prosthesis which we have given in the form of a removable partial denture, it should be stable in the patient's mouth. Moving ahead with the fourth idle requirement, what is the fourth idle requirement? That it should have, or it should provide the opportunity for positioning the denture base wherever needed. So wherever the tooth is absent, wherever the patient needs to be given the prosthesis, it should be able to give, or it should be able to provide the position for that denture base. Moving ahead, the other requirements are idle requirements are that it should be 4 mm away from the gingival margin. That means the upper border should be 4 mm away from the gingival margin in the mandible and 6 mm away from the gingival margin in the maxillary. So this is a maxillary major connector, and this is a mandibular major connector. And here the idle requirement is that in gingival margin, in the mandible, it should be 4 mm away, and in the maxillary, it should be 6 mm away. The other requirements are that it should be comfortable to the patient, like for example, the borders of these major connectors should be slightly curved. It should not impinge the oral mucosa of the patient. It should be the depth of, or the height of this major connector shouldn't interfere with the movement of the tongue. All these comes under the comfort zone of the patient. All these idle requirements needs to be followed whenever we are giving a major connector in the oral cavity of a removable partial denture prosthesis. Other than that, it should be able to self-clean, or it should be self-cleansing. And lastly, it should not allow any food accumulation. So all these are important idle requirements. What are those? The rigidity, this is the most important. Rigidity and stability is the most important idle requirement for a major connector. Other than that, it should provide vertical support, protect to the soft tissues. It should give retention, indirect retention, the 4 mm away from the mandible gingival margin, 6 mm away from the maxillary gingival margin, comfortable to the patient, self-cleansing, and should not allow any food accumulation. So all these 8 idle requirements you need to remember, because this is asked as a short note question and even in a long note question. You need to answer and you need to write these 8 points for the idle requirements of maxillary and mandibular major connector. With this, I am now going to move to the classification. So for a classification, basically we use maxillary and mandibular arch classification, but there are two more classifications on the basis of which this major connector can be classified. First, as I have already told you, depending on the use, it should be maxillary or mandible. Depending on the material, it can be acrylic or metal which we have just seen in the images. And depending on the movement, should be rigid and non-rigid. Non-rigid doesn't mean that the rigidity and stability of this or the major connector is sacrificed. No, they are rigid, but not to that level, and it has some non-rigidity factor also, which can be helpful in certain areas of the oral cavity. But the most important classification based on the use is of the maxillary and the mandibular major connector, and among them the maxillary major connector are these ones. And how would you remember the names? Because each of this name is very, very important for examination, because lot of questions have been asked in theory asking you about the names, enumerate the names of maxillary major connector. So for that, I have made it easy for you by a mnemonic, and that mnemonic is that SSP hits the CCD. Now SSP means the single posterior palatal bar. I'm discussing here about the maxillary. The second one is single broad palatal major connector. P stands for palatal strap. H stands for horseshoe or U-shaped connector. C here stands for closed horseshoe or antero-posterior palatal strap. The other C stands for complete palate, and D stands for double or antero-posterior palatal bar. Okay, so all these are important maxillary major connectors. And coming to the mandibular major connector, For that, I have given another important mnemonic for you to remember, and that is LLMK lawyers. Okay, so here L and S are the two words on the basis of which this mandibular major connector can be remembered, and L stands for lingual bar, the other L stands for lingual plate, the M stands for mandibular cingulum bar, the K stands here for Kennedy bar or double lingual bar, the L stands here for labial bar, and S stands for sublingual bar. Now, I will be discussing each of these major connectors separately, and even in our video sessions we have discussed about these major connectors. Here, this is just a short concept. I want you to understand quickly about what exactly is major connector and how will you remember the maxillary major connectors and mandibular major connectors for you to write it in the examination. So I hope you have understood what exactly is major connector. When an appliance is used to connect one part of the arch to the other side of the arch, that is your major connector, and it is given in a removable partial denture because it's the largest and the most important component of the removable partial denture, and the ideal requirements I have already discussed with you all. So please do remember this, and don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel, the BDS Express YouTube channel. And in case if you want such kind of important updates on dental topics every day, you can join our exclusive WhatsApp group on www.medicoapps.org/group. The link of this group is also given in the description below. So kindly just join our group, just subscribe our channel so that you will be able to get all these important concepts of dental topics and also the MCQ discussions, which is very important for your PG preparation and also for a short note question or an exam, the Viva questions. Thank you for now. Good day. Good luck.